Hello guys, happy new year and welcome back to another new video. So today I will be telling you why I think it is important for us, for you, for me, for us to study Korean language while living in Korea. This video is going to be based on my own personal experience as somebody who's been living in Korea for the past 5 years, as somebody who speaks some level of Korean language. I'll see you shortly. So, what is the Korean language? Korean language is a language spoken by those who live in the Korean peninsula, called Koreans, or in Korean it's called Hangukins. Just like English that has its own alphabet, the A, B, C, the Korean language equally has its own characters. We call it Hanja, which is characters that emanated from China, but they do have Korean pronunciations. And then you equally have the Hangul, which is the actual Korean character which was discovered by King Sejong, a Korean king. His aim for discovering Hangul was to fight illiteracy in the Korean society during his reign. So, while creating the Korean alphabet, he had one thing in his mind: make it easy. That is why, if you're living in Korea, you would notice that everyone who has studied or everyone who has learned the character for, let's say, the character can be learned for less than 2 hours or maybe more than 2 hours, or let's say for a day. If you learn the character for a day, you would be able to read. That's why many people who are able to read the characters can read everything. They can read every signpost. For example, if you're walking around the streets, you'll be able to read everything, but then the only problem that you might have is that you don't know what you're reading. That's how simple the Korean language or the Korean character is. Everybody can read, but then you don't know what you're reading. That's why when you're learning Korean language, you have to take it to another level. What do I mean by another level? You don't just end at the level of learning the character. You have to continue. So how do you continue learning the Korean language? For my own personal experience, I believe that if you want to learn Korean language, my advice to you is that if you've made that decision to learn the language while living in Korea, don't give up. Keep on learning. At a certain period, you realize that it would get easier. At a certain period, you realize that you get to understand more when people speak, but then maybe you might have problem responding when people talk to you. I'll tell you why it is like that. You have to stick to the end of the video. I'm not going to tell you that learning Korean language is very easy, and I'm not also going to tell you that it's difficult. But then most people do give up from the very beginning, which is something that is very bad. Because from my own personal experience, if you are able to persevere and continue learning the language, at a certain period you would realize that it's not as difficult as you might have been thinking. That's why if you're learning Korean language, they will tell you that kumbo ha surok to jemi isoyo, which simply means that the more you learn the language, the more fun it gets. Kumbo ha surok to pyoneyo, which simply means the more you learn the language, the more comfortable you get at studying the language. So my advice to you is that if you've made that decision to learn the language while living in Korea, don't give up. Keep on learning. At a certain period, you realize that it would get easier. So I'll give you one reason why I think it is important for you to learn the language. It makes your life easy. It makes living in Korea easy, especially when you're out there. For example, you want to shop. There are a lot of advantages that you benefit from because of the fact that you know the language. For example, if you're going to shop anywhere, in most of the shops in Korea, they have a point system which many foreigners are not getting from. Even when fueling your car in a petrol station, there are point systems that you accumulate and benefit from those points. So a lot of foreigners just go to many shops and they just buy and they don't benefit from those point systems. There is a lot that you benefit if you know Korean language. So if you've come to Korea, let's say you just arrived Korea and you're not planning on being in the country for more than a year or two, I still think you should consider learning the language, because many people came And then many people came with the intention of not staying for long, but they ended up enjoying the country and they've been there for many years. For example, I've been here for 5 years. I never intended on being in Korea for more than 2 years after my master, but I am still in Korea at this particular moment. So the next thing is, if you've decided to learn the language, how do you proceed? Okay, there are a lot of books out there. Don't make the mistake of trying to look for many books that might have easy grammar or maybe easy sentence structure or vocabulary. Don't go for many books. For example, if you've decided that you use Sogang Hangugo or Sogang Korean language book, stick with it. You can complement that with maybe websites. For example, there is a website called How to Learn Korean Language. That website has been like the best for me because it has everything that has been broken down. Even if you have words, they've explained the words, the meaning in English. Grammar has been broken down to the point where even somebody who's never learned Korean language, even somebody who does not have a teacher, can learn the language and speak the language. Then you can equally complement it on YouTube because there are a lot of videos teaching Korean language on YouTube. Don't go for many materials. They will just end up discouraging you because, like I said, many people do get discouraged from the very beginning, but then after a certain period of time, you'll notice that it gets easy and it gets interesting. Again, after making the decision to learn the language, try to make sure you have a notebook where you can take down notes while learning. If you come across difficult words, if you come across sentences, you can like take them down, and then while you're riding the subway or the bus, you can like take out your note and then try to review what you've learned. Also, what is also very important about learning Korean language is that you have to memorize. You will have to memorize a lot of words, but that does not mean that you cannot do it. It's easy. If you keep on memorizing, those words will come natural. You get to know them. You get to realize that your brain will be able to retain most of those words, and then even the grammar. After learning the grammar, you'll be able to include some of those words that you've learned into your grammar, and you'll be able to make sentences naturally. So you have to take into account the fact that you have to memorize a lot of words. It's not difficult. Don't put it in your mind that it's difficult. Others have been able to do it. There are a lot of foreigners who live in Korea who speak perfect Korean language. You can equally do it. Don't listen to what people say. Your part in life is not the same as another person's part in life. Korean language can open the doors to a lot of possibilities while you're living in Korea. Especially if you're a business person, you can easily bargain for products and get a better price if you know the language. But if you don't know the language, how do you communicate with the nationals? Korea is a new country that is developing. Korea is a very young country that has developed very rapidly, and there are a lot of business opportunities for people to benefit from if they are living in Korea. So finally, why is it that I'm able to understand Korean language more than I'm able to speak the language? I think the main reason as to why I'm able to understand the language more than I speak is because I was exposed to a lot of reading materials, both books and materials online. And then the handicap that I had is because COVID came. What is very important about Korean language is that you need a lot of practice. You need to make a lot of Korean friends with whom you can like practice the language, practice speaking. So, because COVID came, meeting people to like have language exchange, communicate with them in the language so that they can be able to like help you out when you're making mistakes while speaking, those possibilities got blocked. So that's why in most cases people speak, I understand perfectly, and maybe have a bit of difficulties responding. But then, based on the fact that I'm still living in Korea, I believe I will be able to improve my speaking ability. And then, what is very important is that don't ask yourself the question that where am I going to use the language? Remember, Korean companies are multinational. Korean companies like Hyundai, Kia, Samsung, LG are everywhere in the world, and I believe most of those companies will have Korean representative with whom you might gain employment in one of those companies, and you'll be able to like talk to those people in the language. So the mistake that many people do is that they ask themselves the question, where am I going to use this language apart from here in Korea? I think while living in Korea, you would have a lot of opportunities when you know the language, and even out of Korea, you would be able to gain employment in any Korean company. So try not to ask yourself those questions that why am I going to use the language at. So thank you guys, this is the end of the video, and I'll see you in the next video. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel because videos will be coming in on a weekly basis, and most of those videos will be about living in Korea, life in Korea, studying in Korea, studying around the world, and scholarship opportunities that are out there for younger people who want to advance their education.